It is truly magical thinking to think that we can wait for a midterm election that is not going to be manipulated, and that we can wait for all the damage to be done between now and then and think that we can somehow undo it. My guest today, Nathan Taylor, and his organization ETA has been using the hashtag secure the midterms. This is an extremely serious conversation that needs to be had. Election integrity is not tinfoil hat thinking. The whole conversation was gaslit by MAGA in 2020 so that we could never, if we didn't have the courage like those of us in this space do, tackle the subject again. Well, we have the courage. We are tackling it. I'm going to play this little intro video that ETA put together, just kind of summarizing the issues in Pennsylvania. And then he's got some truly shocking analysis that he's about to present to you. So first off, here's that video.
Pennsylvania, the biggest battleground prize of the night, will go to former President Donald Trump. ABC News can now project
election threats, including a series of bomb threats.
Now moving ballots out of the Blair County garage over to the Blair County Convention Center. This happened when a precinct had a bomb scare. We've also received a report that Center County precinct as well as a Cameron County precinct are also dealing with bomb threats.
We've also been made aware that in the course of the last hour, multiple bomb threats have been called into polling locations and municipal buildings across Pennsylvania.
Cambria and the surrounding counties have been experiencing ballot tabulating issues today as many machines are unable to scan ballots. Some precincts are reportedly putting paper ballots in lockboxes to be scanned at a later time, and other precincts are reportedly telling voters to return later in the day once those machines are fixed.
County officials here have been hard at work all morning long trying to fix the voting issues that have run rampant throughout Cambria County all day long.
So say it again. Flash drives are not.
Flash drives that go to the machines are not synced up, and so they're having to get new flash drives out to all the machines.
Yeah,
that's what
is that just Cambria County?
Cambria County
that we know of. Yeah.
Okay.
And then he journeyed to Pennsylvania, where he spent like a month and a half campaigning for me in Pennsylvania. And he's a popular guy, and he was very effective. And he knows those computers better than anybody. All those computers, those vote counting computers. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania like in a landslide, so it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So thank you to Elon.
So please join me in welcoming back to Lights On my friend Nathan Taylor. Nathan, welcome back.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. You caught me off guard with the Midas Touch video because now I'm already thinking about it, and I wanted to say you covered it. It's crazy to me that everyone's like, "Hey, we'll get them next time," but you don't address the problems of is there a next time? So thank you so much for having me again. I'm very happy to be here.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And I know we have so many people in the chat and on this live stream right now that are so excited, and you held this for Lights On today. So let's just get right into it, Nathan. I know you want to give us a little introduction of how you got to where you are with these new analyses.
Yes. So just to clarify, I am one of 3 co-founders of the ETA. The other is Lily and Jive. Lily's in the chat right now, hyping everyone up. But this is something that I didn't do alone. So this organization, we founded it because we wanted answers. We wanted to investigate, and we were concerned that any one person would have a target on their back. So we said, let's do it together. And it's not just us 3. We have, at this point, 20 plus volunteers that are putting ridiculous time and effort and energy. Some of them that are public is another Nate and David Manasco. And just, these are people who, it's amazing that they have given us this effort. And they need more recognition as we go forward. So that's hopefully something we can do as we keep publishing new data. So we have Pennsylvania here.
Can I just jump in for a minute? And I just want to tell our Lights On viewers, there's a lot of overlap between 14th Now and ETA. And speaking of those unnamed people, they're absolute rock stars. I mentioned I didn't sleep, Josh didn't sleep, Cliff didn't sleep. There are also other unnamed superhero rock stars, many of them women behind the scenes making this happen. So shout out to all of them. You know who you are, and we love you and are so grateful for you.
Yes. So we have come here today to show the first of our Pennsylvania analysis. We will have a formal report released in the coming days. So this is your first sneak peek. I told Jessica, since she was the first one to give us the opportunity to talk about election concerns, that we would come to her first always when doing new things. So here we are, and we'll jump right into this. We don't want to spend too long. So here's the general analysis of why are we concerned about Pennsylvania. As you saw in those clips, they had a substantial amount of bomb threats. Almost half of the counties received bomb threats on election day. And the other concern as well is the direct quote from during a pre-inauguration rally mentioning vote counting computers in Pennsylvania. So this is our quick overview of, we are looking at 3 counties in this first analysis. And these are Philadelphia, which is the most populated county. And then we have, I've been coached on how to say these, but I'm probably going to say it wrong anyways. I think it's Allegheny, and then Erie County. So these are all very large population areas. So we wanted to look at these because these are important places where you would expect to see a strong liberal Democratic turnout. All right. And then here's our quick overview for drop-off analysis. If you're not familiar, please go check out Smart Elections. They were very aggressive about looking at drop-off, and they've done amazing work. So the way you read this graph, the bottom axis here is the counties throughout the state. And then the y-axis, the left side here, is the percentage of votes. So in this case, this is Pennsylvania for the 24 election. We're looking at the president, how many votes they got compared to the Senate, the senator candidate. So red is Trump in this case, and blue is Harris. So what we're seeing is the middle of this graph is a 0% line. That is how many votes each candidate's Senate race got. If you go above the line, you got more votes. If you go below the line, you got less votes. So the reason why we highlight drop-off is because drop-off, it doesn't truly tell you anything, but if you look at every county in the state and how consistently the drop-off is, that is a concern. You would expect to see variation. And in this case, in 24, we see some interesting consistency with Harris underperforming and Trump overperforming compared to the Senate races in some of these counties. The next slide actually breaks it down by vote type. This is something I don't think we've published this before in a type of analysis. I'll ask you questions here, Jessica. What immediately jumps out at you from the left graph, which is mail-in, to the right graph, which is election day?
Well, in the left graph, everything seems to be above the line. So tell us why that is.
Yeah. So what's concerning here is all of the drop-off seems to be occurring. The substantial drop-off, as I said, it's not crazy to overperform or underperform, but it should be a little more chaotic and random. And so we see the majority of the drop-off occurring for Harris on election day. And we see the majority of his overperformance as well for Trump on election day. So it's strange that mail-in would be so more normal and that election day would be far more consistent.
And this is an amalgamation of those 3 counties in Pennsylvania?
So these are all the counties, and then we have those 3 counties are involved as well. But they're not
this
actually...
is statewide. This is statewide.
Yes, this is the entire state.
Okay.
As a big picture.
Okay.
And so now we're going to jump into the actual analysis per county. So we're going to do a turnout analysis. Let me clarify. Pennsylvania votes by precinct. Clark County, Nevada, and Nevada as a whole, which our original analysis, our foundation is based upon, they voted by location, and we could pull the data by machine. Pennsylvania doesn't give us that level of data. They let us know by precinct. So this is a analysis that isn't as in-depth as Clark County. It's a different way of looking at it. You'll see some parallels for this, but for this overview, it's just going to be the turnout and some other analysis. So what is a turnout analysis? So what we're looking at is we're doing statistics, and we're looking at how many people showed up to vote in each precinct in these 3 counties. And then we're going to look at how each candidate performed as more people showed up to vote. It's the same analysis we saw in Clark County, just in a different way.
Okay.
All right. And to preface, some of you are familiar with this. This is the concept of a Russian tail. It's just a concern that Roman Udot, I believe a Russian statistician or data analyst, brought up for some of their elections. This was the election to allow President Putin at the time to run for additional terms. And so Roman Udot, had highlighted concerns of potential manipulation, and he highlights that with this Russian tail concept of, instead of it being one group of voting, you see it stretch out, and this may be an indication of fraud. So if we go to the next slides here, we kind of look at this. We've recreated a similar analysis using turnout, and this is Philadelphia. This is mail-in on the left and the presidential race on the right. This is just the presidential race in this case. So the way you read this, the bottom axis is percentage of turnout. It's from 0, meaning no one showed up to vote, to 100%, meaning every person registered in their precinct showed up to vote. Obviously, we really only ever get up to maybe 70% for election day, because not 100% of the people who are registered in the county show up to vote, or precinct show up to vote. And then the y-axis is the amount of votes that they got. So the way we're looking here is mail-in on the left. We see Harris as a blue line, and we see Trump as a red-orange line. And so what is distinctly noticeable here is we see, although both candidates get different amounts of votes, they are somewhat consistent in the shape from both parties, because we have a two-party system. In this case, they split the votes. On the right is election day. So left is mail-in. We don't see anything noticeably concerning for mail-in on the left. In this case, we see that both parties are similar in their shape of distribution for how many people showed up to vote and how many votes they got. On the right, and the reason why we kind of highlight this, and it's concerning, and we will publish more of our findings with our audit report, and we'll kind of go into the specifics, is on the right, we see that after a certain percentage of voter turnout is hit, in this case, Trump begins to grow in votes over Harris. And so this is an interesting way to look at it. It's almost equivalent to a vote change. And we want to highlight this because as we get deeper into this analysis, if something is changing the votes as turnout is increasing, what could cause that? So if you go to the next slide here, we're highlighting that shift as turnout increases. All right, now we're going to get into a little more of the details. I know we only have 10 minutes or so. So this is Allegheny County. This is mail-in. What we want to highlight here is this is that turnout analysis. On the left, we're looking at what the percentage of votes the candidate got compared to the amount of votes cast. So what we see with mail-in is it doesn't matter how many votes are cast, you are generally a straight line for both candidates. In this case, Harris has more votes. She's at a higher percentage. On the right, this is that turnout analysis. We talked about it in a different way. So what's interesting here is, as we said, we see that straight line of, although turnout increases, and in this case, mail-in, I think it was only 0 to 40% or so of the actual votes were mail-in, 45%. So a little less than half of all the votes cast are mail-in. So we see it's a straight line. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is where it gets concerning. This is one of the 3 counties. What we see here for election day, it's concerning because we see a concern as the amount of votes increase, or as more people turned up to vote in Allegheny County for election day, we see a change occur. On the left, we see it after a certain amount of votes, the Republican Party begins to grow in the percentage of votes they get. On the right, we see it as these diagonal lines. So you'll notice as more people showed up to vote, the Republicans grew in percentage and the Democrats decreased in the amount of votes they got. This is concerning. We have a few theories on what would cause this. The problem is we can't think of any other theories right now for what would cause this that would be more normal. Our concern is this could be caused by vote manipulation, changing votes at the tabulation level. It's the same concern we saw in Clark County. As you saw in mail-in, you didn't see a correlation for voter turnout changing the amount of votes people got. But in election day, we see it here in Allegheny County.
And the theory is that as you're seeing these patterns like radically shift on these graphs, that the possibility, the theory that you're contemplating is that at some point during election day, something was done to manipulate the vote count, whether it was a USB, whether it was through a Starlink connection, which, by the way, is also not conspiracy. We've had actual election security experts on this program explain why our elections are still not secure, why there are internet connections in places that there should not be, why passwords from Dominion voting machines were printed all over the place. It's in court documents how the Stop the Steal people in 2020 had access to software. None of this is conspiracy theory. It is literally in court documents and verified by election security experts. So, to speculate that something may be awry causing these patterns is not conspiracy. There is abundant evidence out there that we didn't do our due diligence to make sure that something was not done to interfere.
The main concern is there's only one way to know truly what's going on here, and that is to do targeted audits of the actual votes cast, the paper ballots. That is the only way to really know. And so we can have all of this evidence with statistical analysis, and our next steps as well will be, as I said, we'll be publishing this formally, and then we're doing more analysis. We're looking at the demographic of voters in these areas. We're doing the same thing we did for Clark County. And the bottom line up front is, if this did happen, if there was manipulation, then we need audits to make sure it didn't happen, or else the midterms could be compromised. The next presidential election could be compromised. So that is why we have a petition. It's in the description of this live stream, I believe. So we are petitioning the Pennsylvania government, the federal or the state government in this case, the governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general. We're bringing attention to them that we need audits. And so it gets easier. And the secretary of state, I believe, specifically has authority and power to do audits and do investigations. The governor less so, but they have direct connection with the rest of the state.
Yeah,
So,
the link is in the description of this video. Before, when I checked it earlier, it was like 2,000 and some. Let's get it, like, by the time this video is shared over the next few days, let's get this well over 20,000, 30,000, 40, like, just share this everywhere, amplify it, get that petition signed. The description has the link, click on it, sign that petition. We need thousands and thousands of signatures to demand that election hygiene be conducted. My God almighty.
yes. And we have a few other counties we'll highlight real quick. It's the same concern. It's just in different ways.
Okay.
And so the main focus with Allegheny, if you go to the next slide, we checked a few other races, and it's not just the presidential race. If manipulation occurred here and the tabulation machines or whatever it is that is compromised, we see it in other down ballot races, partisan down ballot races. What's concerning is we've not been able to find other substantial races that really don't show this. The nonpartisan and single candidate races look that straight line. They're consistent. They don't see change. But these races are smaller, and they're harder to really say are accurate when comparing it. But that's the concern, is we've not been able to find races that don't have election day concerns, but then mail-in looks normal. So, yeah. And if you go to the next slides here, we'll go to look at the other ones. It's Erie County, same thing. Mail-in looks good. Next slide. Election day has the same concern at a different level. You're seeing that as more people show up to vote, the Republican Party begins to grow in the amount of votes they got. And then you go to the next slide. Here's Philadelphia. This is the largest county in the state. So you'll notice it's more full. This is a more full amount of votes. They have more votes. They have more places to look at, more precincts. But nonetheless, mail-in shows a more expected non-correlation of vote. Yeah, the turnout doesn't change. The candidates kind of stay in their groupings and then move to the right. And then the next slide. This one's very aggressive. This one is concerningly strong, where we see both candidates start off. In this case, the Democrats start off at a closer 80% average or so. And then the Republicans, as more people showed up to vote, as more votes were cast, the Republicans gained a higher percentage of votes in these precincts. So in precincts where more people voted, the Republican Party got a larger percentage of the votes. That doesn't really make sense.
So
It
to be
doesn't
clear,
match.
yeah, this is for both the presidential and the down ballot partisan races,
Yes.
meaning that McCormick's win over Bob Casey, there was possible manipulation and suggested manipulation by this data that you're seeing in Philadelphia.
Yes, this occurred all the way down the ticket in these counties, which is interesting because the drop-off analysis wouldn't specifically catch this per county. That's why we looked at the state as a whole, and we saw concerns across many counties. But in these few counties, you wouldn't have caught this with a drop-off analysis because there's no other race to compare it to if all races were potentially manipulated. And I want to highlight that we have another video clip on the ETA's YouTube channel that talks about a specific quote. And that quote is concerning now with this knowledge. And it was something along the lines of having a secret with, I think, Speaker Mike Johnson, and Trump had said that, hey, we're doing really well in these other races, and we have a secret, and I'll tell you about it after the election. And I'm
That was
if
during that Nazi rally, the first Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden before the election.
Right. And my concern is, what was that secret?
Yeah.
Was it manipulation of other races and not just the presidential race? So these are concerns we want addressed. That's why we want audits. That's why we're fighting. That's why we have a petition. And that's why we're going to continue to publish data like this as we go forward, and not just in Pennsylvania. We have more data. We have more analysis for places we haven't unveiled yet, because one, it takes us a while to validate. That's why it's taken us a little longer than we expected for our Pennsylvania analysis, is we want to make sure these concerns are real and that this data can be reproduced. So that is why we will continue.
I will just tell our viewers, I asked Nathan last night, I said, from a chain of custody perspective, can you personally, Nathan, not your team, but you personally vouch for these graphs, these analysis, what you're showing us being a byproduct of the actual publicly available election data in these counties? And he said, yes, I can both personally vouch for it, and it has been cross-checked by members of our team and multiple others, in your ETA organization. Multiple people, including Nathan himself, can vouch for this data being accurate.
Yes. And in this case, what's unique about how we're doing data analysis going forward is the Clark County analysis. It was a combination of me, Jive, David, ultimately Nate, and others who kind of stepped forward and did it together. This time around, Pennsylvania was done by data analysts in ETA, independent of me. I didn't do the initial analysis for this, but I did replicate it, and then I'm presenting it.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Well, I encourage everybody to go to electiontruthalliance.org.
Yeah, we
to
have
see
a
the
final slide here.
Full scope of their work. And I'll let you summarize this. Go ahead, Nate.
There you go. Yep. So as I said, key takeaways is drop-off is concerning across the state at large. And then as we looked at specific counties, we are seeing concerns of potential manipulation with voter turnout showing the Republicans gaining in vote. It doesn't make sense. And so we want an audit of the paper trails. So sign our petition. You can go to the next slide, and that'll kind of be my conclusion here is reach out. That's the whole point. Sign the petition, call your representatives, send them emails. We'll also be releasing a draft letter and a list of state officials that you can reach out to, because the only way we're going to get answers is if enough people care to get us these answers.
Yeah. And really, I just want to remind our viewers, you are picking up the job that law enforcement should be doing. This should not be the work of a private organization. This is the work of law enforcement and state agencies to do. So we're really, just like we're doing at 14th now with the protests, picking up the work that our elected representatives should be doing and reclaiming our power. This is a real opportunity for you to do that. We will not let democracy die on our watch. This is all part of this fight. How can we have a functioning democracy if we do not even know if the people in power have been legitimately elected? And for God's sakes, we have enough red flags and glaring alarm bells leading up to this election that we need to make sure we do our due diligence.
And the final thing is, as we proceed forward, we're doing more analysis in the ETA. As this gets bigger and spreads, as I've told people before, for those donating to us, we are We've assembled a legal team, and we are making teams dedicated to each of the counties and each of the states that we're going to bring concerns to. That is a expensive and time-consuming process, and it's almost a process of last resort because, as I said, if the states themselves cared and the secretaries of state came forward, we wouldn't need to sue a county to gain access to the paper ballots. It could be far easier and more transparent. So that's why we ask, if nothing else, spread the word and bring attention to this. But we will sue if we have to in places where we are concerned.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for them to have legal standing in the lawsuits that really need to be brought, they have to be able to show that the data is backed up by the paper ballots, that you see a contradiction in the data that came out from the election versus the actual evidence of how people voted. And the only way to do that is to get those paper ballots, which is why it's so important for you to sign and share that petition that we linked to.
Yes, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Nate. Always a pleasure to have you on. I wish you guys the very best.
Thank you. Good luck.